Hello, hello. Welcome to a very special edition of the December Blazor Community Stand-Up. Today we're going to be talking about a lot of amazing features that we are considering for .NET 8. So this is just some of the things that we're thinking about doing, planning out, and all that kind of stuff. This isn't at all the roadmap for .NET 8 or anything like that quite yet. But before we dive into all that and community links, let's just do a quick intro of everyone on the stream. Let's start off with Mackinnon. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Mackinnon, and I'm a software engineer on the Blazor team.
Awesome. John?
Hi, I'm John. I'm a PM on the, we're the DevDiv community team now.
Sounds good. Thank you. And Dan?
Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel Roth. I am a product manager on the ASP.NET team for Blazor and our web UI investments, MVC, Razer pages, and so on.
Awesome. And my name is Tanay, and I also work on the Blazor team. So to start off, let's dive right into some of the community links. Mackinnon, do you want to show this off today?
Sure. Yeah. So first, we have a really cool project by Hunter Freeman. This is blazor.text.editor, and this is a really cool, ambitious project, which is to replicate a lot of the features of the Monaco text editor, which VS Code uses, but written in Blazor.
Oh, yes.
So this project is definitely worth checking out. It's super cool. A lot of features are already implemented. I played around with it. It's really neat. Yeah, definitely check that out. It's super interesting project.
Visual Studio Blazor.
Yes. So very exciting. I've never seen Blazor used to do something like this. So this is super, super cool. Definitely check that out. Yeah. Next, we have a file manager app written in Maui Blazor. I just thought this was a really cool example of an app that has a really beautiful UI written in Maui Blazor. It's open source, so you can check it out. It's called FX Files. Maybe learn from them, see how they do it. Next, we have a library, blazor.filesystem access. So if your app needs to access directories or read files, this is a nice C# wrapper over the browser APIs for accessing the file system. So if you need functionality like this, this library will make doing that a lot easier, and you don't have to write a single line of JavaScript. So that's pretty cool. And finally, we have a fun one. These are some demo projects that utilize the Blazor Canvas library, and they have some cool real-time like Blazor graphics demos. This is kind of like a less conventional use of Blazor, but I just thought it was really cool that there are these really performant graphics demos that you can check out. So there's some pretty cool simulations, and I would just recommend checking that out. So that's kind of a fun one to end with, but that's about it for the community links.
Wow.
Cool, yeah.
Let me throw, if you can, while you have your tabs open, can you go to, open one and go to .netconf.net, because one late thing I want to throw into is
.netconf.net. How do you spell that? Is it
so .netconf.net? Yep. And click on Watch on Demand, and that'll take you to all the videos, and there's 80 of them. And there's a bunch of deep dive content on .NET 7. There's Blazor. There's so much cool stuff there. So just want to make sure people know all about that. We did that in November. All the videos are there, and there's so much great goodness.
Awesome.
Cool.
Sounds great. Dan, do you want to take it over from here?
Oh, it's time. It's time. All right. Yes.
Time.
So yeah, .NET Conf, that's when we announced the release of .NET 7, which is now available. It's production ready. I hope you have all downloaded and installed it and tried out all the great new features, both in ASP.NET Core and Blazor, and then across the framework. We shipped a lot of great stuff in .NET 7, in the Blazor framework included. So custom elements is in, handling location changing events. We did some work on data binding. We added the new after, get, and set modifiers. We do know there was an issue initially with those modifiers with the .NET 7 release. I believe that has finally been patched today. So if you get the latest .NET 7 patch and you're having issues with those modifiers, that should now be addressed. Sorry about that. That was a bug that got found really late. Dynamic authentication requests, the improved JavaScript interop model, a lot of WebAssembly improvements, SIMD and exception handling, and a whole lot more. So if you haven't updated your Blazor apps to .NET 7, strongly encourage you to do so. You should get a whole bunch of feature improvements as well as performance and other fundamental improvements. You can get it at get.net/7. And also there was one of the videos that John was showing is actually a video that was done by Steve Sanderson where he walks through. Oh, thanks. Yes, now you can see the links at the bottom where he walks through all of the new Blazor.net 7 features. You can find Steve's talk at aka.ms/Blazor in .NET 7. So lots of great stuff. Today, what we want to do is we want to talk about .NET 8 planning. .NET 7 just released last month, but we're already in the throes of trying to figure out what do we do in .NET 8 to make the .NET platform even better, to make Blazor even better. Now, we wanted to engage the Blazor community, the .NET community in this planning discussion. We're an open source, public open source project, so we want to make sure we're hearing what your needs are, what your scenarios are, what your requirements are as we do this planning process and trying to figure out which features and improvements will have the most impact, will have the most benefit for the ecosystem. And we're still very much in that planning process. We do not yet have a committed roadmap for the release. Every year we try to publish on, usually we do it on GitHub for ASP.NET Core, where we publish like a GitHub issue that has the roadmap for the expected set of enhancements and features that we're doing for a given release. We have not published that yet because we're still working through what the right set of features are. And that's why we're talking to you today. You are our community members, some of our biggest fans. We want to hear what are the things that you'd like to see us do in .NET 8. So as the .NET bot here is saying, this is about planning in this session today. This is not a committed .NET 8 roadmap. Now, we are going to share things that we are thinking about, that we're prototyping, experimenting with, that we think we're going to do in .NET 8. We don't have any demos yet. We're not going to be showing demos, but we're going to share things that we think are important. Things we want to hear from you is, do you agree? Like, are we focusing on the right areas? Are we focusing on the right features and improvements that you think would have the most benefit for the Blazor framework and for the community? And we also want to hear, like, well, what's missing? Like, what things did we not say that you're like, well, what about this, Dan? Like, we need this feature that's not on your list. We will share a list of things at the end. I'll share some items that we explicitly aren't thinking that we're going to tackle in .NET 8, and we want to hear your feedback on that as well. Like, maybe there's items on this list that you're like, no, that one's really important. Okay, so this is a planning discussion and kickoff. We want to do this with the community, not a roadmap yet. So don't take any of the slides. I'm going to show you some slides which have some bullets, that look like features. Don't take those as committed features yet. I don't want you to be disappointed and start framing your product plans around those just yet, because they're not committed yet. But we do want to start engaging with you and hearing your feedback. All right. And what part of the reason, by the way, that we're doing this is like in .NET 7, we did have a roadmap issue that we published for Blazor, and we had a big long list of things that we were really excited to go do. Unfortunately, like, quite a few of those items didn't make it in for .NET 7. Like, I think it's about almost like half of the items we originally published on that roadmap didn't actually make it in. A big part of that was because the .NET MAUI release and the Blazor hybrid support for .NET MAUI was all happening in parallel. And so the team was very heavily involved with that effort. That effort did end up taking a little bit longer than we originally anticipated, which took cycles away from .NET 7. So that's part of why that happened. This year, we want to be a little bit more, try and be a little bit more conservative, so that you can trust that when we publish the roadmap, that you know that these are things that hopefully are actually going to get delivered, so that you can make your corresponding plans around that. So we'll see if we can do better this year. Obviously with software, plans change, the unexpected things happen. So some things may still drop off, but we will do the best we can to give a good upfront view of what we're planning to do. How do we approach planning for our .NET releases and on the Blazor team? There's a lot of different, every year we tweak things and change how we approach the planning process to try and make it better. The 4 things that I really wanted to highlight with you all about how we think about planning are the following. So first of all, we're an open source project, and we have specific team scope and principles that we use when we decide what it is that we're building. Like, what is the ASP.NET Core project broadly all about? We're trying to build the best web framework and platform based on .NET. You know, the absolute best way to build web applications using the .NET platform. That's our goal. We're very focused on web-based technologies, HTML, CSS, JSON, this set of worlds. Sometimes we get asks on the GitHub repo for, you know, perfectly valid feature requests, but don't really fit within our scope or principles of what we're trying to achieve with this project. One example that I'll raise, and this may be a little contentious, I apologize, but sometimes people will come and say, hey, it would be great if I could use XAML as a way to build web applications. XAML is a popular markup technology that we use in .NET for like native client development. WPF, Maui uses it for native UI. Sometimes we get asked like, hey, could you support XAML for web development? We don't consider that really part of the scope of what our project is about. Like our project's about web technologies, HTML, CSS, XAML we feel is kind of outside of that scope for ASP.NET Core. So we often will, not it's me, like we'll go close those issues and say, thank you for the suggestion. That's not really something that we're trying to tackle, but please go work with the XAML ecosystem on those types of features. And there are absolutely projects that are looking at work like that. Like there are, there's Uno and Avalonia. These are XAML-based community projects that do look at supporting XAML as a model on the web. We is another one that's basically a Xamarin-style XAML model, but that functions on the web. So it's a perfectly valid ask. It's just not something that's within our scope, if that makes sense. So sometimes we say no to things based on our principles and the scope of things that we're trying to tackle. We also plan based off of your feedback, of course. Like what you tell us is important to you. We try our best to listen to those items and prioritize those items so that we're satisfying your needs. Where do we listen for community feedback? We're listening on GitHub, on the GitHub issues that you open. We're looking at the comments that people post and the thumbs ups and reactions that people post on those issues, and we try and digest as much as that data as possible. We're also looking at what people are saying on Reddit and on Twitter, other social media sites to understand how are people doing with our frameworks and where are they hitting pain, where would they like to see improvements. We look at industry trends, like what's happening in the web development space. You know, we look around and see what are other people doing, what seems to be the new hotness, what's happening in the web platform, what's happening in the JavaScript land or the other developer ecosystems. You know, we've been looking at things like Next.js and Solid and Remix and these new innovations that happen across the developer ecosystem. What can we learn from what they're doing? What can we apply to our own ecosystem? And then lastly, of course, we also have just our own ideas on strategic direction. Like what do we really think the platform needs to solve to be able to move ourselves forward? These are items that aren't necessarily like the top up, thumbs up +1 issues on GitHub, but things that we feel are just strategic for .NET that we need to invest in to move forward. I think of investments like native AOT as being potentially a reaction to some things that are happening in the developer ecosystem, but also just something that we feel is a strategic direction for .NET that we feel like is a key capability for the platform that we'd like to have. So those are the things that we think about. Where can you fit in this process? Well, of course, please submit issues on GitHub. If you have, I've been looking at the chat and I've been seeing things saying, oh man, I really hope the Blazor team does, fill in the blank, this feature. Well, the first thing I want to ask you is there a GitHub issue tracking the thing that you're hoping and praying is going to be delivered in .NET 8? If there isn't, it's pretty unlikely it's going to happen. So make sure you have told us that these things are important to you by filing GitHub issues in the as appropriate a repo as you can find. If it's Blazor, most likely you want to go to the .NET ASP.NET Core repo, and that's where you're going to post your bug reports and feature suggestions. I'll talk a little bit about Razer in a second. We do have a new Razer repo that we can direct you to. But if you put it in ASP.NET Core and it really belongs in Razer, we can move it there. If it's related to Blazor hybrid, like native app development, then probably the .NET Maui repo is where you're going to want to put those issues. And then, of course, there's the core .NET Runtime repo for things related to the core framework libraries and our WebAssembly support. Yes, thank you, John. So file GitHub issues. Make sure that your hopes and dreams have been written to Santa, if you will, sent to us on GitHub. If there's an issue already tracking what you want, that's great. Give it a +1 on the original post, the top post. Okay, the top issue, like one of the things we'll do. Let me show you this. I as the PM for one of the PMs on ASP.NET Core, one thing I do is a query that looks like this, where I look at all the ASP.NET Core issues, and I'm basically looking at everything that's open that's in the Blazor space, and then I sort just by reactions, just by +1, just see what do people care about. Now, obviously, this is not a perfect signal. We understand that older issues tend to get more reactions. This can, of course, be gamed. Like, please don't game this signal. Like, for the good of the community, don't go tell all your friends to upvote some issue artificially. We do try to use this as a rough representation of how many people really care about this item. If you care about something, give it a +1. That helps us know that this is something that a large number of people, or at least someone out there, wants us to handle. You can kind of scan through here and see what's bubbling up to the top in the Blazor space. Multi-threading. There's a top request here for nested routing. We'll talk about that later. The pre-rendering and authentication work that we started in .NET 7 and are still working on delivering. Hopefully, we actually think we can. I think the plan is still to deliver a package for that based on .NET 7, so that you don't have to wait for .NET 8 to actually release. Yeah, so you can get an idea of what we're actually looking at. This isn't the only thing we look at, so don't expect us to, like, if your item is one more +1 above this other item, that means it's definitely going to happen first. Like, there's those other considerations that we still think about, like strategic direction, industry trends, that we also consider as part of our planning exercise. But it does help. So give a +1 for issues that you care about. And then lastly, the thing you can help us with is you can comment on issues that you care about with your specific scenarios, requirements, and preferred developer experience. That helps us know, why is this issue important? What are you really hoping to do with it? So that when we go to then take that issue and design a solution, we can make sure that we're looking at what people are actually hoping to do, and that the thing we've designed matches your scenarios, meets your requirements. It also gives us an idea of what you're expecting the actual implemented feature to look like. What are you hoping to be able to do with the feature? That is incredibly helpful, and that can really make the difference between, like, sometimes we look at an issue and it seems like a lot of people want it, but we don't really understand the why, like how they plan to use it, and that creates enough ambiguity in the design that, as a framework maintainers, we have to be careful. We don't want to put things into the framework that end up being wrong or kind of broken in ways that now we have to maintain for a long period of time. That hurts the platform. So we were a little conservative in what we put in. So the more you can share with us about what really matters for your specific scenarios as concretely as possible, that really helps tremendously as well. All right. Any questions about that, Tanay or Mackinnon?
I don't think we have too many questions about this specific process at hand yet, but I'm sure we had some general questions. I don't know if we want to dive into them right now, or maybe wait for you to talk about some of the things we're thinking about before we dive into the specific questions.
If there's questions about specific areas of investment, let me go through the areas that we're currently thinking about, and then we can see maybe that answers some of their questions. And if we don't hit some of those topics, then let's go back and make sure we talk about them. Okay, so I'm now going to put some bullet points on the screen, and I just want to be very clear. Like, sometimes when I put bullet points, that's like, this is what we're doing for the next release, or this is what we're shipped. That's not what these are. These are areas that we are thinking about, that we're considering for .NET 8. They have bubbled up on our prioritization exercises. We think they're important. We think they're strategic. We want to know if you agree or disagree. These are not committed features yet, so don't go tweeting and saying, "Oh my goodness, Blazor's doing feature X yet." Because oh shoot, I think I just accidentally unplugged my camera. 1 second.
That's how serious you are about the Big Dan disclaimers. I made a banner for you, Dan.
Oh no! I
it says Big Dan disclaimers.
We need the explosion effect for the technical difficulties.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
I got that. I got you covered. There we go.
Has it popped up yet?
Nope.
No. Which one is? I kicked my cable. I think it's this. Okay, this one.
This is how you know it's live. Taking a look at the starred comments in case any are good to talk about here. There's one just nice shout out here, Dan. People really, and of course you can't see them, but people love the drawings on the wall behind you. So.
Still nothing yet? Oh, I'm sorry about this. Let me see if I can restart my... There we go. Woo! Keep my feet still next time. Okay, sorry about that, folks. Okay, let's move on. All right, all the caveats have been made. Let's talk about things that we're looking at. Okay, so some significant areas of Blazor investigation that we're currently looking at. Today, when you think about using Blazor to build a web application, we have multiple hosting models, like ways of hosting Blazor components. And we have two for the web. We have one called Blazor Server, where you host your components actually from the server, and you set up a real-time connection with the browser, and we manage all the UI interactions and events through that connection. So it's that kind of a thin client-like model. And then we have Blazor Webassembly, where we actually download the .NET runtime and all your Blazor code client-side to the app, to the browser, and we run it client-side on the user's machine. And these two different hosting models have different trade-offs. Like Blazor Server loads fast, and it's kind of simplifying because you don't have to like set up APIs. All your code's just already running in the server environment, which is super convenient. But you know, it's running over a connection, so there's latency issues. There's scale-out concerns because every user that uses your app, you got to have an active connection and state on the server for that user. Blazor WebAssembly is great because it's a true client-side model. You can just deploy the app as like a static site. It uses the client's resources, memory and compute for doing things, so you can offload work from the server. But it's a bigger download because you have to download a runtime, so the app loads slower. The runtime performance of the runtime also is not as good as like a JIT-based runtime that you would normally get on the server. So there's performance considerations you have to worry about. You could use AOT, but that has its own trade-offs. It just seems like there's a bunch of trade-offs depending on which hosting model you pick. And so one of the areas that we're looking at for .NET 8 is, well, is there a way that we could somehow combine these two things, like get the best of both worlds, have a way where you can get the benefits of Blazor Server and the benefits of Blazor WebAssembly in a single application? That might mean a number of different things that we're looking at, like can you mix Blazor WebAssembly components and Blazor Server components in the same app? Can we maybe start out with Blazor Server, which loads quickly, and sneak down the Blazor WebAssembly runtime in the background, and then transition to Blazor WebAssembly at a later point, so you kind of get the benefits of fast load, but also the offloading to the client. These are areas that we're looking at, is how could we make these two ways of building a web app with Blazor more one consistent pattern. So that's one area we're looking at. I've tried to put GitHub issue numbers. These are all in the ASP.NET Core repo. If you're interested in this topic and you want to go participate in that conversation, then I think that's the right issue. Go ahead and take note and go ahead and chat there. We're also looking at could we leverage Blazor more for server-side rendering? Like we have, .NET has always had a great story for server-side based applications. Think all the way back with ASP.NET, with web forms and ASP.NET MVC, and now we have ASP.NET Core MVC and Razer pages. By server-side rendering, what I mean is you get an HTTP request, you run some code, and then you dynamically generate the HTML that you send back in the response. And that pattern is very common and has a lot of benefits. There's been kind of a move to the client, and that pendulum tends to seem kind of swing back and forth. But we're looking at, like, could we leverage more of Blazor's component model for UI composition when doing server-side rendering? Like you can kind of do it today. Like you can take the component tag helper and use that to render Blazor components inside of a CSHTML file, like inside what's going to be a server rendered file. We're looking at, can we make that experience more natural? Like, could you use more of a Blazor component style Razer syntax in the CSHTML files? Could you just route directly to a component and so maybe not need a CSHTML file at all? Those are all things that we're looking at and investigating to try and align and integrate more the web UI patterns that we have in ASP.NET Core. The last one is also like sometimes people want to have multiple Blazor applications hosted on potentially even on the same page. Think like micro front end style patterns where you're really trying to decouple and separate different parts of your app in different ways. There are ways you can sort of do that with Blazor, but you really can't get full isolation with the different Blazor apps. This is something that we had wanted to get tackled in .NET 7, didn't quite get done. We started the work, but didn't really finish it. We're hoping to bring that forward to fruition in the .NET 8 timeframe. Okay, so some high-level Blazor integration scenarios. Let me move on. Then we have like the different specific hosting models. Like if you are hosting a component on the server, making that experience better, faster, more have better scale characteristics. We've had this pause and resume feature on our roadmap actually for I think for a couple releases now, and we keep having to push it. But the idea with pause and resume in Blazor server is, well, you have what we call a circuit where you're maintaining state on the server for each of the users that's using your application. And if that state, if that circuit goes away for any reason, like let's say you push an update to the server and it causes the server to restart, or the server just goes down, then the state for that user is now gone. There's nothing that persists it. And if the user reconnects, then they've lost any state that they had with that application. The idea with pause and resume is it'd be nice if there was a way in the circuit to persist some state so that you could rehydrate it later. Like maybe you're going to move that circuit to a different server so you could persist it and then rehydrate it separately. Maybe the circuit has gone idle and you don't want to really like just keep that state in memory the whole time. So you kind of pause the circuit until the user comes back and then you restart it again. That helps with scale out. This is an area that we want to do for a while, and we're expecting that we will, back up that. We're not committing to anything yet for .NET 8, but we really, really hope that we will get to this one in the .NET 8 timeframe. Related to that feature work is the there's a disclaimer again. Thank you, John. You need the ability to monitor the activity of the circuit if you're going to do these intelligent things like pause it because it's idle or potentially evict it, which is the next item. So we're looking at adding APIs and the capability to monitor circuit activity, APIs for being to evict circuits. We're also planning to enable compression for the Blazor server protocol. Blazor server is already really highly optimized in terms of the payloads that we send on the WebSocket connection for handling the UI interactions. But we have done some experiments, and it looks like if we could enable compression on that transport, that we would get some significant size savings. So we're looking at how we might be able to do that and do that securely and safely, given the characteristics of compression. So for you Blazor server fans out there, a bunch of stuff that we're looking at doing in that space. We're expecting to continue to invest on the WebAssembly front. Multi-threading, I think, is our top thumbs up item on our backlogs. We started work on that in .NET 7. Maybe some of you have played around with the early multi-threading previews that we shipped. We're hoping to get that fully productized in .NET 8. If you have specific scenarios and thoughts on multi-threading, what you wanted to do with it, we'd love to hear more about that on the GitHub issue. For those of you who have played around with the preview, I'm assuming that you will notice that there's some interesting characteristics to multi-threading when running in a WebAssembly-based environment. In order to make that work, we're using like multiple service workers in the background to actually execute the threads, and we use shared array buffers to like manage memory that needs to be shared across those threads. In the browsers, there's still limitations on how far you can push the threading model compared to what you might be used to on a server or maybe in like a desktop application. You have to enable, I think it's called same origin isolation. There's a set of headers that you actually have to specify on the response to the app that will put the browser in a more isolated state in order for us to be able to even use shared array buffers. That can have impact on certain features like federated auth and things like that. So we're curious to hear how much those limitations impact the scenarios that you really care about. Another limitation is like there's only so many service workers that you can actually spawn up simultaneously, usually in the browser. I think the limit right now that we have is 4. So you can have as many threads as you want, as long as there's only 4 at a given time. Like that's kind of the way that works. So if you're finding that, no, I have this scenario where I need to spawn like 100 threads, that's not expected to currently work with the way multi-threading works in browsers. So if you have scenarios requirements like that, please let us know so we can understand like how people really will be using this feature, because it's kind of a new space. Doing the browsers haven't inherently been multi-threaded for a long time. So trying to do threads in the browser is kind of a new path to be treading. Okay, other things in WebAssembly. We always are looking to improve the load time of Blazor WebAssembly apps. I know some people were commenting about, Blazor WebAssembly apps, they're a little bigger, a little heftier around the waist when it comes to the download, and that's kind of intrinsic to the model. We have to download a runtime, we have to download the framework, but we're always looking to how can we shrink the size of the application? How can we do tricks to preload things or to make it load faster? We know, and specifically on low end like mobile devices, the loading of Blazor WebAssembly apps can be particularly slow. So we're in .NET 8, we're thinking about doing investigations on what can we do specifically for those style of devices. Hot reload improvements. The runtime that we use on WebAssembly has a more limited hot reload capabilities than what we've had for quite a while, actually, in the core CLR based runtime. We keep plugging forward on adding more hot reload capabilities to the .NET WebAssembly runtime. Things like support for instance fields and so forth. There's a good GitHub issue that has a big long list of all the things that we want to support with hot reload on WebAssembly, and we just keep plugging through those so you can take a look and see if your favorite hot reload feature is listed there. Alternative app packaging. We have received reports from some users that with Blazor WebAssembly apps, because the form of your code is a DLL. It's a .NET assembly, which is fundamentally a DLL, a Windows PE file, an executable file. Some firewalls or antivirus software, it really depends on the environment, will sometimes take issue with this. Like they'll see there's a DLL on the wire and be like, whoa, hold on there, web app, what are you doing? And the apps sometimes get blocked. We're exploring like alternative packaging formats that we might be able to use for Blazor WebAssembly apps to potentially avoid that problem. Similar, yeah.
Dan, I thought I remembered in .NET 6, there was like some sort of thing where you could like had some control about where the files went or what they were called or something.
Yeah.
Javier did a blog post on that.
He did, yeah. So we have been working. This has been an issue that's been going on for a little while. Like it's not a new issue. We have done work to try and address this. One of the first things we did is we gave the developer control over the packaging format. If you want to customize how your Blazor WebAssembly app is packaged, like change the extensions of files or whatever, zip things up, you can completely control that. So for your app, you could do a custom thing. Of course, not everyone wants to do that. Like if you're in this boat, like having to do a custom thing is work. It'd be nice if there was just a default solution out of the box that you could use that would just work. But to be clear, this is something we've also reached out to like antivirus vendors on, and like try to work with them to get them, because these are all false positives fundamentally, and they don't want that either. So to some extent we've been able to address this by also working with them and getting them to fix their products, but we still occasionally hear reports of this. We shipped also a package that did a custom packaging based off of a MIME multi-part payload, and tried that. That helped with some users. I think we still saw some reports though that even with that packaging, people were still seeing some issues where some security packages were like opening up the MIME multi-part payload and looking inside and then still hitting a false positive. There's actually a really good community project. I forget the name of it. Maybe we can find a link later and post it, John, where they also did a similar thing where they came up with their own mutations of the assemblies and way of packaging the Blazor WebAssembly apps based off of community feedback for different software packages. And that seems to have had quite a bit of success. So we're looking at what that community project has done. We're talking to the antivirus vendors to see if we can do something that will solve this problem sort of once and for all. Like, can we have a default solution that will just work? So that's an area we're still actively investigating and talking about. It might mean that like instead of a DLL, maybe we actually use something else, like something that's not a full Windows PE file on the wire, so that they don't get flagged. Doesn't seem to happen to everyone. It seems to be like only in specific environments. If you have hit this, we want to know. Please comment on the issue. Tell us the specific software package that's hitting it. Tell us the things you try to work around it. We have a bunch of options for repackaging the app that you can try, and that data really helps us know what to do here. Because one of the reasons it's taking a while is it's hard for us to reproduce every single environment that people have where they're deploying their Blazor WebAssembly apps. And to be clear, this is not is not an indication that the Blazor WebAssembly apps are somehow insecure. Everything that we do in a Blazor WebAssembly app runs within the browser security sandbox. You cannot do anything in a Blazor WebAssembly app that you couldn't already do from JavaScript. We're not executing those .NET assemblies natively on your machine. They're running on a WebAssembly-based .NET runtime that's hosted inside of a security sandbox. But there's the world still needs to learn about some of the new patterns that are enabled by WebAssembly-based web development, and it's just taking some time for that to get addressed. Mixed mode AOT, we have AOT support. People who are really up to date on everything that we do in Blazor might point out, like, Dan, you actually already do mixed mode AOT with Blazor WebAssembly, and that is technically true. If you don't know what AOT is ahead of time compilation. This is where you kind of do the work of the JIT, the just-in-time compiler, up front as part of your build step, where you take your .NET code and turn it into native instructions as part of the build. In the case of a Blazor WebAssembly app, those native instructions would be WebAssembly. You just turn it into WebAssembly as part of the build. We actually need still the .NET assemblies in a few cases, like for generics and certain like ILGen scenarios, I think. And so we still actually require the DLLs as part of the even an ahead of time compiled app. And we still use the IL interpreter for a few cases to give you as much .NET compatibility as possible. So technically today we operate in this sort of mixed mode, but for the most part, you are ahead of time compiling the whole app. It's kind of an all or nothing setup. We are discussing, we've been discussing this for a while. Can we give you more control over how much of the app actually gets ahead of time compiled? Like maybe you can knock out certain assemblies that really aren't performance critical. You don't need them ahead of time compiled, and that can help reduce the download size of the app. So ongoing investigations on that front. We've made good progress on that in .NET 7, but wasn't quite ready to ship. So we're looking to .NET 8 for finally shipping that. There's a bunch of work that's going to happen in .NET 8 that might not be directly user-facing, but will certainly impact how Blazor works under the covers when running on WebAssembly. In .NET 7, we introduced the new JavaScript interop model for when you're on WebAssembly, and a bunch of .NET WebAssembly capabilities got pushed down in the stack. It's not just all about Blazor anymore. If you just want to run call some .NET code from a JavaScript-based application, that's now possible in .NET 7. In .NET 8, we want to finish up rationalizing that work with Blazor. Things that Blazor does today that really should be lower in the stack, we're going to push those down. Rationalizing the new JavaScript interop model for WebAssembly with what Blazor does, like basically replumbing some of Blazor's abstractions for JavaScript interop with the underlying runtime support. This is not going to change like IJS runtime or those abstractions. Those will still be the abstractions you use, but their implementations will start picking up the work that we did in .NET 8. And then lastly is Wazzy. So Wazzy is the WebAssembly system interface, and it's a standard for interacting with a WebAssembly host system. Like you can imagine there are a bunch of WebAssembly runtimes that can run WebAssembly code outside of a browser. And what Wazzy defines is how those code in those runtimes can then interact with the host system. This enables scenarios like server-side hosted WebAssembly usage, where maybe you want to use WebAssembly not in a browser, but as a isolation model for server-hosted code. Common scenarios that we hear from users about server-hosted WebAssembly are like, I want to do some like user-defined functions as part of a service, a server-hosted system, and I need them to be isolated. I want them to be quick. I don't want to spin up like a whole container for them. And I also want to give them the flexibility to code in any language they want. WebAssembly is really appealing for those types of scenarios. We have teams, partner teams even inside of Microsoft that are interested in this. We want to support the server-hosted WebAssembly scenarios with a .NET development experience, and that means carrying forward some of the experiments that we've actually already shared publicly. Steve Sanderson did some really cool talks and demos of showing running .NET code in a WebAssembly runtime using Wazzy. He even got like a whole like ASP.NET Core server like running in this environment, which was pretty fun. We're looking to take that work forward in the .NET 8 timeframe and enable production scenarios. All right, a couple more, and then we'll go to questions. Make sure I'll go for 5 more minutes, and then we'll see what people are saying, because we definitely want to be listening. So Blazor Hybrid, We shipped Blazor Hybrid with .NET MAUI. That all shipped together with .NET 7, which was awesome. MAUI is in the box now with .NET 7. We're looking at how we can make that experience of building native client apps using a combination of web and native technologies even better in .NET 8. The first thing that we're looking at is, can we make the experience a little bit more seamless when you want to have both a native client app and a web app that are sharing the same Blazor components? That's the beauty of the Blazor hybrid model, that's possible. But today you kind of have to piece it together with like multiple projects. Like you have a MAUI project, which has your Blazor web view, and then you have your web app where you're hosting the components. Maybe that's a Blazor server app or a Blazor Webassembly app. And then you put your components all in like a shared Razer class library that you then reference from either. That's how like the .NET Podcasts sample app works, which is fine. I mean, that's a functional way of doing things. But could we do better? Like, could we somehow enable you to have one project that allows you to target both mobile, desktop, and web with a cohesive development experience? That's something that we're going to be looking at in .NET 8. We've had this experimental project for a while called Mobile Blazor Bindings, which also looked at using Razer and Blazor components to build native UI in addition to web-based hybrid style UI. We needed to decide in .NET 8 what do we carry that forward? Should that be a thing? If you have strong opinions, let us know. We're still discussing it and thinking about it. We know there's some issues with drag and drop scenarios in hybrid scenarios that we need to fix up. We're expecting to address that in .NET 8. Empty template option. We added empty templates for everything except for .NET MAUI Blazor projects. That's something we'll look at, see if we can get in. If you're running on Windows, the web view that you use on Windows is WebView 2, and that supports a couple different distribution models. Right now, we only support I forget what it's called. I think it's like Greenfield model, where you basically assume that WebView 2 has been installed on the machine and you're just going to use the version that's there. There's a different model where you can actually package WebView 2 with your application and make sure that you're using specifically that version of WebView 2. That's called the fixed distribution mode. We'll look at potentially supporting that in .NET 8, and then adding some nice tooling experiences around authentication. Okay, speaking of authentication, pre-rendering with authentication is something we are actively working on. We know we have some cleanup work to do on authentication in particularly Blazor WebAssembly. We currently rely on a OIDC JavaScript client that we know has been archived. It's not being maintained. It was originally written by the folks that built Identity Server, and they're no longer maintaining it. So we need to find a good maintained solution for client-side OIDC. And we need to decide like what do we do with Identity Server going forward. And now that it's moved to a commercial license, do we continue to include it? Should we do something else? We're discussing options in that space. And in general, we've heard a lot of feedback about just complexity with authentication. It'd be nice if it was simpler. Can we make it easier to set up auth in any ASP.NET Core app, not just Blazor applications? There's a lot of discussions happening right now around what can we do to make auth easier. I did want to give a quick mention about Razer and tooling. We have a new Razer tooling repo. It's not just tooling, it's actually tooling and compiler. That's .NET/Razer. This is where all of the like the tooling, by tooling I mean like the experience in the Razer editor, so like IntelliSense, colorization, formatting, all of the code that the guts, the core engine that we use for the Razer editor is actually public and available on GitHub, and it lives in the .NET Razer repo. So if you have issues related to the Razer tooling experience, issues with the editor, that's where you can find work that's happening in that space. I do still encourage you to file issues using the Visual Studio feedback tool. There's like a button in the corner that's like, report a problem, or you can go into the help menu and find it. If you're having problems with the Razer editor, use that tool to report an issue. That will initially go into the Visual Studio feedback system, which is a kind of a separate system from GitHub. But the Razer tooling team looks at all those issues as well, and that gives them also a bunch of logs and diagnostics they can use to figure out problems, and then they move them to GitHub once they're ready. It's very similar to what we do with the C# editor. So if you're wondering like where can you give feedback on the Razer editing experience, like in Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio for Mac, .NET/Razer is where you're going to want to go. That's where also the compiler now lives, and the compiler handles all of the Razer language features like Razer directives and syntax. So if there are like specific Razer syntax experiences that you're hoping will get enabled, they might not be in the ASP.NET Core repo. They might actually be living in this Razer repo. So look for them there. Like things like I want to support namespace aliases, or I'd like to support optional dependency injection into a Blazor component. Things like that require compiler changes. Those are all going to be in the Razer repo. So that's where you're going to want to give the thumbs ups. Currently, those teams are primarily focused on performance and fundamentals, stability, performance. So they're not doing a lot of like feature work in terms of like adding new bells and whistles to the editing experience, because they're really trying to work on rationalizing the Razer compiler with what all the other things that we do with Roslyn, and making the experience performant and stable and good. We know some people have reported having issues with like, IntelliSense being a little flaky in the Razer editor, those types of things. That's what those teams are currently heavily focused on right now. Lastly, I wanted to highlight some things that we're not expecting to do. And it's not that we can't, it's just that for various reasons, we don't think these are things that are in scope for .NET 8. We invite you to try and change our minds if you think that some of these things are really important. Combining multiple routers, or sometimes this is called nested routing. This is actually a very highly upvoted issue on the Blazor backlog. A lot of the feedback we see in this item is like people coming from other JavaScript front-end frameworks like Angular that have a particular style of routing that they use for their components, and then not seeing exact parallels in the Blazor space. We're hesitant to do anything on this item. We know there's a lot of people that are saying we'd like better routing, but we're hesitant because we're still a little unclear on the exact scenarios, requirements that people want to enable. So if this is an area that you think we should be investing in, the thing that you could do that would help us the most is let us know exactly the type of thing that you're trying to do. Give us very concrete scenarios and use cases on this issue, so that we can really understand what would need to be designed. We're a framework. We're very conservative and hesitant to put stuff into the framework that we're not confident is exactly what users need. So more scenarios and requirements, the better. State transitions for animations is another highly upvoted issue that you might be wondering, like, are we going to do that? There's some interesting things happening in the web platform, like support for transitions that is being sort of baked into the web, that we're kind of watching to see, like, well, maybe that solves a lot of the problems that this issue is tracking. If you believe otherwise, let us know. Comment on the issue.
The issue too has a link to that, and I also see there's some community projects around transitions.
Okay, in the Blazor space.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't tried them, of course. I just saw them 3 seconds ago, but
that's great. Yeah, so there might be solutions that you can use that come from the community.
Yeah.
So yeah, take a look at those, and if you like them and you think they should be part of the framework, then let us know that too. Hash routing is a different style of routing where you use the hash part of the URL as the thing that determines what component renders. Some frameworks support this. It's a way to do routing that doesn't require you to have a server piece that reroutes requests back to the root when you want to do deep linking. We think it's kind of an older style of routing that we're not excited about adding to the stack. So we're currently not thinking we're not going to do it. If you believe otherwise, let us know. And so on. Like there's those other items here. We've had requests for Blazor hybrid support for WinUI 3. We expect to target WinUI 3 through MAUI, so we're thinking that we're not going to try and do a Blazor web view for WinUI 3. If you think it's really important, let us know. These are the items that let's put out there, that if you're hoping for one of these, then we need more feedback to let us know that these things are something we should prioritize higher. And with that, schedule. .NET 8 obviously ships in November of next year. The first previews will start coming out like probably first quarter of next year. Probably February is where the preview one will drop. I expect that we'll publish an actual roadmap with what we think we really will be doing. Again, everything we just said is the stuff we're thinking about, not committed. An actual roadmap probably before that first preview one release. So early 2023 is when you should expect to see that show up on GitHub. And yes, .NET 8 is the next long-term support release for the .NET platform. Every even-numbered release is an LTS release. All right. Whew. My mouth is dry for talking too much. Let's see what you have to say. What do we got, John and Mackinnon and Tanay?
Wow, there's a lot.
Great.
Let me see. I'll throw just one up, just I think this is one thing you mentioned here, this view transitions. You
Yes.
said with animation. Sorry, I've just seen this come up over time, and so I'm interested in this space. Cool.
Yeah, we do have a question, or more of a concern, I guess, from a commenter about the combination of Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly.
Okay.
They're wondering, there's no way you can get Blazor WebAssembly signed off, so don't make it a requirement or I'll to give up Blazor and switch to something else. So could you provide some clarity about what's happening to existing hosting models?
Yeah, I think we're on the same page on that. Like when we look at combining, it doesn't mean that you'll now have to use both. Like things that we're thinking about is like, parts of your app that you want to be use the interactive Blazor server model, you can choose to do that. Other parts that you would like to be client, you can do that. And if you want to be able to transition, it's more about enabling different setups and flows than it is about requiring them to be used together. So yeah, if you like the current Blazor server model and you're hoping that you can just stick with that, the answer is yes, you'll be able to still stick with that in the future. There's no takes these back. We're not going to take it back.
Yep.
Okay, awesome. Let's dive into some other questions. How about this one here? Is mobile Blazor binding something we're thinking about for .NET 8?
So we are thinking about it. It's definitely an area that we're not sure. Like I know me personally, I'm also not sure. So if you're not familiar with mobile Blazor bindings, like mobile Blazor bindings experimented with the hybrid model, as well as a way of doing native UI in Razer. And we productized the hybrid part of mobile Blazor bindings with Blazor Hybrid and supporting .NET MAUI as well as WPF and WinForms. The native UI part is interesting. Like what you do there is we created a bunch of Blazor components that effectively wrap the native UI controls that effectively MAUI is providing under the covers and give you a way to then compose and author native UI using Blazor components. And you do that in a Razer file. That's how mobile Blazor bindings work. Some thought reactions I have to that is, okay, well, if you look at the markup of what those Razer files then look like it's effectively a completely custom markup syntax at that point. We already have a markup syntax for doing native UI. It's called XAML. So what are we actually really buying there? Well, some people like the imperative nature of Razer, like they just like the way you can just write a for each loop or an if statement right there in the Razer syntax. So maybe Razer is a selling point. Some people really just like the Blazor components as a component model and life cycle. Maybe there's value there. My initial gut is that the mobile Blazor bindings will appeal to people who know Blazor. Like if you're a Blazor developer, you look at that and say like, oh yeah, I get that. I know how to do that. That's way more familiar to me than XAML. So I can understand that would appeal to an existing Blazor audience. Where it's a little trickier is trying to then pitch that to the broader .NET ecosystem, like or broader developer ecosystem. Like, is that really the right way to write native UI? Is to invent yet another markup syntax? It's not HTML, it's not XAML, it's just another one. I don't know. Like maybe there's enough benefits from its characteristics that we should do that. We're having lots of interesting conversations with the MAUI team about, what should the future-looking programming model for building native client apps be? Is XAML the thing that's going to carry the platform forward? We need XAML, like we want XAML because we have all the Xamarin Forms devs, like that's what all their apps are built in, and we want them to be able to move forward onto MAUI. But if you're coming from outside of .NET, is XAML the thing that we should be teaching them? It's an XML-based syntax. Should we be teaching them Razer? Should we have just a pure C# model? Like if you look at frameworks like Flutter or Swift UI, like these are, you just operate within the coding language and use a Fluent style UI for building up the UI tree. Should we have something like that? Maybe for both Blazor and for MAUI. These are very early conversations, and I would say we don't know yet. So we're interested in engaging with folks in the community on that discussion and hearing what you think, and we're thinking about it. So nothing, not like with everything in this presentation, nothing committed yet, and that's definitely one that's it's a puzzler. I'm not sure yet on that one.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Mackinnon, do you want to take the next question?
Sure thing. Let me just find one. Do you have one ready?
Sure.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry, kind of threw you on the spot. Sorry about that. Question here is just with regards to the upgrade paths and all that kind of stuff. So what's the recommendation for upgrading from .NET 6 to 8? Should people migrate to .NET 7 in the interim, or what should they
Yes.
really be doing here?
Yes. So, okay, the way I think about it is we know that we have, if you can upgrade, you absolutely should. And it should be pretty painless. Like we maintain a very high compat bar. So migrating from 6 to 7 should be mostly just change the TFM, change the package versions, and it should just work. If it doesn't, let us know, because that means we may have introduced a breaking change that we didn't mean to, and maybe that's something we need to service, like through a patch. If you can upgrade, I strongly encourage you to do that. You'll get the latest features, the latest performance improvements, and all those benefits. We do understand that there are some users that can't move that fast, that they need a longer supported platform to sit on, that their environment maybe doesn't allow the agility, or reasons why they can't move on a like yearly cadence with each .NET release. And if that's the case, then that's what the long-term support releases are for. They have a 3-year support life cycle. You can be on .NET 6 and then move to .NET 8 when you're ready. Moving from 6 to 7 to 8 is absolutely not required. Do I expect that you can jump from 6 to 8? Yes, again, highly compatible release. We do have long-term support users that we know will want to just upgrade to the next long-term support release. And so you should expect the compatibility to be high between those two releases. Gone are the days where with a like remember the .NET Core releases, .NET Core 1.0, 2.0, 3.0, where we were like shuffling the stack around as we were trying to figure out what cross-platform .NET looked like, and there were lots of breaking changes. Those days are gone. Like we have lots of users on .NET. If we just break 1% of them, we have thousands and thousands of angry developers. Well, not angry, but disappointed developers that are impacted by that. So we take compat very, very seriously. So you should feel good that a .NET 6 to .NET 8 jump will be fine. But if you can move to .NET 7, I highly recommend it. John, your audio is not coming through for me. Is that just me?
I think
It's just you.
Okay.
Okay.
Now it's me. I'd just like to make a short additional sales pitch on that, because it is true you can go 6 to 8. I really am. I got questions on this. I was at Dev Intersection last week, and I highly recommend to people, don't put it off. It's so much easier if you update every year with each release. It's less work each time, and if you also then get all the performance improvements, you get new features. Instead of waiting to use those new features and new performance things and all that, if you just do little smaller incremental updates. And as an example, the .NET website has a very tiny, it's 1 PM and I think 1.5 or 2 devs. And they were running on .NET 7 the day of release. It's something where if you are of the mindset of upgrade only LTS versions, reconsider it. There's cases where, like you said, you can't ship a release. You're building a product that needs to whatever, or there's some corporate thing. But if you can, it's like the changes between releases are small now. So anyways, that's my sales pitch.
Okay, awesome. Mackinnon?
Yeah, sure. So we have another question. I have a fear about sharing the code to the client machine for Blazor WebAssembly. What about decompiling and security?
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, with a Blazor WebAssembly app, you are shipping your .NET assemblies to the client. So can the user or anyone who browses to your app, can they grab those assemblies and decompile them and look at your code? Yes, they can. So if you have code that you don't want them to see or you don't want them to have, yeah, don't ship it down to the client. That's one of the reasons why we factor the Blazor WebAssembly apps as a separate project. It's a separate assembly, its own dependencies. You should be thinking carefully about what dependencies am I okay with actually going to the client machine. If you still want to use Blazor and you have dependencies that maybe they're not factored quite beautifully in a way that you can, slice and dice things in a way that's convenient, Blazor Server is a fantastic way to then write your application, because none of your code will leave the server machine. It all will stay on the server. That's where it runs. We ship a little bit of JavaScript down to the client to set up the connection and manage all the UI interactions, but all your .NET code is still running server side. So if that's a concern, Blazor Server is a great way to get the interactivity of a SPA style application, but without the concern of pushing maybe IP or code that you just don't. Maybe it's really just a really big assembly. You don't want to push that thing all the way down to the client to keep that all happily running on the server.
Sounds great. Thanks. Do you have a question today?
Sure. So this user here is asking, are you thinking about standalone Blazor custom components, or sorry, custom elements as well that don't necessarily need a host page?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So I assume by standalone, I think what you mean is that like today you can't really package Blazor into the custom element itself. Like Blazor kind of the custom you have to set up the Blazor script outside of the custom element to get it to work. Actually, Mackinnon, you're probably better to speak to this than I am. Like, do you have thoughts on this? And is this an area you think we should be tackling?
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely, I think you're on the right track with that. You do have to call blazor.start to get it up and running, and then you can use custom elements freely. If the question was about do you need an ASP.NET Core server to make it work, we already support Blazor WebAssembly custom elements, so you can still use them in a static site and everything. But yeah, so we're still looking at potential ways to improve custom elements to make that experience improved.
As an example, at .NET Conf, Steve Sanderson's State of Blazor talk, whatever, he showed running a custom element in a WordPress site. So I thought that was a fun one.
So you can do that today. But if you're really trying to make sure that custom element does not bleed out, it is a slightly Blazor leaks out of the custom element a little bit in the way it's done. I would say that currently that hasn't bubbled up high on our priority queue as something that we would be tackling in the .NET 8 timeframe. In fact, I don't even know if we have a good GitHub issue that I would point you to right now. I mean, it's certainly an issue that I'm aware of, but I don't know that we have a good issue tracking it. So take a look. If there's not one, please create one. If there is one, give it an upvote and let us know and tell us why it's important for your use cases. Yeah, great feedback to let us know on that one.
Okay, awesome. Mackinnon, did you have a question in mind, or should I ask another one here?
I see another starred question. I can go ahead and read that.
Cool.
So we have a question. What's the recommended approach to using .NET with WASM in an existing JavaScript .NET application? The current template spin up their own server. Do you have much to say about that?
So okay. I mean, it could mean a couple things, right? It could mean that, well, I just want to use a Blazor custom element, in which case you would use Blazor. If you want to use a full Blazor component in an existing JavaScript app, then you would set up Blazor custom elements in that project. We have a couple sample projects out there in our docs that you can look at how to do that. Another scenario that we sometimes hear is I have a JavaScript based app and I just want to call into some .NET code. I have a .NET assembly with a function in it and a method that I just want to use that logic without having to rewrite it all in JavaScript, and I want to see if I can use .NET running on WebAssembly in order to do that. That was a new scenario that we enabled in .NET 7, so you can do that by using the .NET.js script, and there are some experimental templates. By experimental, I mean that the developer experience around the templates wasn't really done in .NET 7, but at least shows how you can set up using this model of calling .NET from a JavaScript app. And that could be a browser-based application. And there's even a template that shows doing it from a Node-based application. If you wanted to call into some .NET code that runs on WebAssembly from Node, there's an example of how to do that there. So I would look at those templates and how to set it up. And actually, it was just earlier this morning, we were having a conversation about should we do more to provide more seamless integrations of using these style of libraries from JavaScript applications to make it easier. I think if you're finding that it's the setup process is a bit too manual, and you wish that we did I don't know, some sort of plugin thing into Webpack or something that just sets things up for you, that would be useful for us to know as well. But in terms of what we have right now, take a look at the WASM experimental workload, which carries the two the two project templates that show how to set up calling .NET from JavaScript.
Sounds good. So I think we have time for a couple more questions, if that's all right. We have a question here asking about the possibility of stateless components. So is this something that we're thinking about on Blazor or for Blazor?
Stateless components. One Razer file that does not have any state, just parameters and markup. I mean, well, Eagle, you could just not have any state. They don't put any state components. Let me see. It should just be turned into a render frag. As I assume this is is this an optimization, like as a way of improving performance, or like, I guess I would want to know first what benefit you hope to get out of the component being stateless. Like what's the goal there? I don't know if he's watching the chat.
Yes, so
okay.
It's an optimization.
Yeah. So we're not currently have any immediate plans to try and to do stateless components as an optimization. Again, like if you're finding that rendering is slow in certain cases, let us know. Like submit an issue for stateless components and let us know the type of rendering that you're doing, where the current way Blazor components work right now is causing performance overhead. Then a component type does not get instantiated. Okay. Yep. Yeah, makes sense. All right. Great suggestion. If other folks are interested in that as well, let us know. I mean, we are interested in general making sure that Blazor rendering is efficient.
Cool. Next question here is, I would like to use variables directly on the style attribute in HTML elements without having to interpolate or something like that.
Yes. Okay. I think what this is like today in Blazor, if you want to use like Razer syntax inside of an attribute value, it's kind of like an all or nothing deal. Like you can't like mix content in the attribute. So this is a compiler. This is a great example of a Razer compiler ask. Like that capability is really controlled by the thing that takes your Razer files and turns them into C# so they can be compiled and actually executed on the .NET runtime. There is an issue I believe on the Razer repo that is tracking this, and I know that a number of people have asked about this over the years. I think we do support this in CSHTML, but not in Razer, and that is like sort of a jarring difference. We're aware of it. I think it actually already has a fair number of upvotes compared to the other Razer compiler asks. The only issue we have right now is the Razer compiler team is very focused right now on getting the sort of the fundamentals and infrastructure of the compiler cleaned up a bit. Razer has grown sort of organically over the years, like unlike Roslyn, where the C# team kind of went away for 5 years and thought really hard about how to build compilers and really carefully architected this thing, and then 5 years later said, okay, here's how we're going to do C# going forward. Razer was more like, let's just make it work type of a technology. And so the C# compiler team has actually now taken ownership of the Razer compiler and is doing some really great stuff to address how the Razer compiler works, make things more properly architected. That's one of the big areas that they're focused on right now. So new features like support for mixed content and attributes we don't expect it in the short term, but I do hope that there will be time in the .NET 8 frame where they will be doing work with the Razer compiler folks, and this may be one of the things that we should bubble to the top of the stack. So go look for the existing issue. I think it's like mixed content and attributes is its name in the Razer repo, and give that a thumbs up and let us know that that's something that you'd like. Thank you for making that ask. Yeah, that's definitely something we have heard before.
Sounds good. Mackinnon, did you have any other questions?
Sure. It looks like there's one more. I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, but someone's asking, Blazor needs Angular level nested routing. Will we ever get that? Yeah.
So, Mubarak, that was one of the items I actually currently have on the out of scope list, and it's not because there aren't a lot of people that are saying exactly what you're saying that they want it, but currently our team is uncertain exactly what we need to deliver for that feature that isn't what we already have and that will meet people's specific use cases. There is a I think Steve Sanderson even put like a comment on the nested routing issue in the Blazor repo, in the ASP.NET Core repo, saying would really help if we could get very concrete use cases and scenarios. It's not, and to be clear on that, it's not enough for us right now to say like Angular has this, so please do it too. Like we need more than that. Like we need to know like what can you not do with the current routing system that maybe Angular does allow you to do that you need, and show us why. Like show us the scenario that you're trying to accomplish. So if you have specific use cases, please post them on that issue. That would be tremendously helpful.
Sounds good. Thanks for answering. I think that basically does it for the questions in the chat. There are a few more, but we want to keep things a bit more general. So like questions and stuff like that can kind of apply to everyone, and everyone can learn more about some of the things that we're thinking about for .NET 8. One more thing that I did want to mention is another new thing that's going to be happening in .NET 8 is Mackinnon will be the new face of the Blazor community stand-up. So you'll be seeing him a lot more in the stand-ups, doing the community links, introductions, and all that kind of awesome stuff. So really excited to welcome you on board, Mackinnon, and really excited to all the future community stand-ups you'll be doing. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Tanay. I'm excited as well.
Awesome. And I think that basically does it for the Blazor community stand-up for December. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you really enjoyed learning about some of the things we're thinking about for .NET 8. And we'd love to get your feedback, as Dan mentioned, on the GitHub issues and all that kind of stuff, so we can better understand what the community as a whole is looking to achieve and get for .NET 8. I think that basically does it. Thank you all once again for watching. Thank you, Dan, Mackinnon, John, for joining us on the community stream, and have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.